Let us know in the comments where you're watching from today. This story takes place in a small-town high school where appearances and social status meant everything to most students. But one girl was about to teach her classmates an unforgettable lesson about judging others. The autumn breeze rustled through the maple trees surrounding Riverside High School as students filtered into their classrooms for another seemingly ordinary day. Among them was Jessica Martinez, a quiet sophomore who preferred to keep to herself, carrying worn textbooks and wearing her grandfather's old army jacket, despite the occasional snickers it drew from her classmates. The jacket had seen better days. Its olive green fabric faded at the shoulders, but Jessica wore it with silent pride, fingers often tracing the barely visible name tape that read, R. Rambo. In Ms. Anderson's English class, the assignment seemed simple enough. Present a speech about your most inspiring family member. As students shared predictable stories about successful business people and local celebrities, the atmosphere remained, politely attentive but largely disinterested. That was until Jessica stood up, her grandfather's jacket wrapped around her like armor. The moment she mentioned her grandfather was John Rambo, the legendary Special Forces veteran. The classroom erupted in poorly concealed laughter. Leading the chorus of disbelief was Amanda Blake, daughter of the town's most prominent real estate developer, who never missed an opportunity to remind others of her social standing. "Sure, and my uncle is Superman," Amanda called out, earning scattered giggles from her usual followers. "Everyone knows Rambo is just a movie character. You really expect us to believe Sylvester Stallone is your grandfather?" Her perfectly manicured nails drummed against her desk as she smirked, certain she had caught Jessica in an embarrassing lie. Jessica remained calm, her voice steady as she continued her presentation, explaining how her grandfather had served in Vietnam, trained elite soldiers, and later consulted on military films. The more she spoke, the more Amanda's interruptions grew pointed and cruel, each barb designed to discredit Jessica's story. "If your grandfather is such a big shot, why do you wear that ratty old jacket? Why doesn't he buy you designer clothes? Like normal grandparents?" Amanda's words cut through the air, sharp and deliberate. "Or maybe he's just another washed-up veteran telling tall tales to impress his granddaughter." The teacher attempted to restore order, but the damage was done. Whispers and snickers filled the room as Jessica stood her ground, neither backing down nor lashing out. Her composure only seemed to fuel Amanda's determination to expose what she believed was an obvious fabrication. What no one in the classroom knew was that Jessica's story was about to be validated in the most extraordinary way. Her grandfather had indeed worked closely with Sylvester Stallone, not just on the films, but as a military consultant and friend. And fate had arranged for an unexpected visitor to arrive at Riverside High that very week. The following day, as Amanda continued to spread rumors about Jessica's pathetic attempt at attention-seeking, the school secretary's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing a special assembly. The students filed into the gymnasium, with Amanda and her friends claiming prime seats in the front row, while Jessica quietly took her place near the back. The principal approached the microphone, his excitement barely contained as he prepared to introduce their surprise guest. The gymnasium doors opened and a familiar figure stepped in, causing a wave of gasps and whispers to sweep through the crowd. There, in the flesh, stood Sylvester Stallone, his presence commanding attention from every corner of the room. But it wasn't just his celebrity status that silenced the whispers. It was the way his eyes scanned the crowd until they found Jessica, and the warm smile of recognition that spread across his face. "Where's my old friend's granddaughter?" he called out, his distinctive voice echoing through the suddenly silent gymnasium. "Jessica Martinez, front and center." The stunned silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Jessica's footsteps as she made her way forward. Amanda's face had lost all color, her earlier mockery transformed into shocked disbelief as Stallone embraced Jessica like family. "Your grandfather," Stallone began, addressing not just Jessica but the entire assembly, "is one of the finest men I've ever known. The character of John Rambo was inspired by real heroes like him, men who sacrificed everything for their country, and their brothers in arms. That jacket you're wearing, I remember when he wore it during our training sessions together." The revelation sent ripples through the crowd. Students who had laughed at Jessica's story just days before now sat in stunned silence, while Amanda seemed to shrink in her seat, her earlier confidence evaporating with each word from Stallone's lips. "Your grandfather taught me more than just military tactics," Stallone continued, his hand resting proudly on Jessica's shoulder. "He taught me about honor, about standing tall in the face of adversity, and about the quiet strength it takes to endure without seeking validation from others. I see that same strength in you, Jessica." The assembly concluded with Stallone sharing stories about his time with Jessica's grandfather, each anecdote further validating everything she had said in her presentation. As students filed out of the gymnasium, many approached Jessica to apologize for their skepticism, while Amanda made a hasty retreat, unable to face the truth that had so thoroughly demolished her cruel assumptions. Later that day, as Jessica prepared to leave school, she found a small group of students gathered around her locker. Instead of the usual teasing, they asked genuine questions about her grandfather, their interest now sincere and respectful. Amanda watched from a distance, the lesson in humility written clearly across her face. The story spread beyond Riverside High, teaching a powerful lesson about prejudice, respect, and the danger of judging others based on appearances. Jessica's quiet dignity in the face of mockery, coupled with the dramatic validation of her claims, became a testament to the strength of character she had inherited from her grandfather. Have you ever been in a situation where others doubted your truth? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more incredible real-life stories that remind us never to judge a book by its cover. The days following Sylvester Stallone's surprise visit to Riverside High School transformed the campus atmosphere entirely. Jessica Martinez found herself at the center of attention, but not in the way she had dreaded all these years. The worn army jacket she wore now drew admiring glances instead of sneers, though she remained the same quiet, dignified person she had always been. During lunch period, the cafeteria buzzed with excitement as students gathered around Jessica's table, eager to hear more about her grandfather. The same people who had once avoided sitting with her now competed for nearby seats, their curiosity genuine and respectful. Yet, Jessica noticed one person notably absent from the crowds. Amanda Blake had taken to eating lunch alone in the far corner, her usual entourage dispersed. The school newspaper editor approached Jessica's table, requesting an exclusive interview about her family's legacy. As Jessica shared her story, she revealed details that painted a picture far richer than anyone had imagined. Her grandfather hadn't just inspired a character, he had shaped generations of soldiers through his training programs and later helped countless veterans transition back to civilian life. "My grandfather always taught me that true strength isn't about proving yourself to others," Jessica explained, her voice carrying across the now silent cafeteria. "It's about knowing who you are and standing firm in that truth, even when no one else believes in you." The story of Jessica's family began to unfold like chapters in an epic novel. Her grandfather had started as a young recruit, rising through the ranks through sheer determination and an unwavering moral compass. His expertise in survival training and combat tactics had caught the attention of military brass, leading to his selection for elite training programs. In the school library, where Jessica often spent her free periods, the librarian had created a special display featuring books about military history and the special forces. Students who had never shown interest in such subjects now pored over the volumes, seeking to understand the world that had shaped Jessica's grandfather. During history class, Mr. Rodriguez invited Jessica to share some of her grandfather's experiences, turning it into a valuable lesson about the Vietnam era and its impact on American society. The students listened intently as Jessica described how her grandfather had channeled his combat experience into training programs that emphasized not just physical prowess, but mental resilience and ethical decision-making. Amanda, who sat in the back row during these discussions, found herself increasingly drawn to Jessica's stories, though pride kept her from joining the conversations. The facade of superiority she had maintained for so long was crumbling, replaced by a growing realization about the true meaning of strength and character. One afternoon, as Jessica walked through the parking lot after school, she found Amanda standing beside her car, away from prying eyes. The usually confident queen bee of Riverside High seemed smaller somehow, her designer clothes and perfect makeup unable to mask her discomfort. "I've been trying to find the right words," Amanda began, her voice lacking its usual sharp edge. "My grandfather, he also served in Vietnam. He never talks about it. I think he might have known yours." The admission seemed to cost her something, but also lifted a weight from her shoulders. Jessica listened as Amanda revealed how her own family's wealth had come later, after her grandfather's struggles with PTSD had driven a wedge between him and her father. The perfectionism, the need to assert social status, it all stemmed from a deep-seated fear of returning to those difficult years. The conversation marked a turning point, not just for Amanda, but for the entire school. Students began sharing their own family stories, creating a tapestry of experiences that stretched far beyond the superficial social hierarchies that had once seemed so important. In Ms. Anderson's English class, where the story had first begun, the teacher noticed a profound change in her students' writing assignments. Their essays reflected deeper understanding of human complexity, moving beyond snap judgments to explore the hidden depths in every person's story. The local community took notice as well. Veterans groups reached out to the school, offering to share their experiences with students. Jessica's grandfather's legacy was creating ripples that extended far beyond one dramatic revelation. Even the school's atmosphere shifted. The cliques that had once divided the student body began to dissolve as teenagers discovered connections they never knew existed. Children of veterans found common ground with first-generation immigrants, sharing stories of resilience and determination passed down through their families. Jessica's relationship with her grandfather's jacket evolved too. While she still wore it proudly, she now shared its story freely with others. Each scuff and fade marked a chapter in a life dedicated to service, each wrinkle a reminder of the challenges overcome. The school's guidance counselor observed an interesting trend. More students were expressing interest in military service, not for glory or adventure, but for the opportunity to serve something greater than themselves. Jessica's grandfather's story had awakened them to the possibility that true heroism often wore humble clothes. As autumn progressed, the lesson that had begun with a simple class presentation continued to resonate through the halls of Riverside High. Students learned that every person they passed in the hallway carried a story worth knowing, a legacy worth respecting. Have you ever discovered something extraordinary about someone you thought you knew? Share your story of unexpected revelations in the comments below. Remember, sometimes the most remarkable stories are hidden behind the quietest facades. As autumn leaves painted the streets of Riverside in shades of gold and crimson, the story of Jessica Martinez and her extraordinary grandfather continued to unfold in unexpected ways. The media attention that followed Sylvester Stallone's visit had opened a floodgate of memories and connections that no one could have anticipated. One morning, Jessica arrived at school to find an elderly veteran waiting in the principal's office. His weathered face broke into a smile as he introduced himself as one of her grandfather's former trainees. More would follow in the coming weeks, men and women whose lives had been touched by the real man behind the Rambo legend. Through their stories, a more complex portrait of Jessica's grandfather emerged. They spoke of his legendary survival skills, but also of quiet moments around campfires where he would share wisdom that went far beyond military tactics. One veteran recalled how he had taught them to identify edible plants while discussing philosophy, believing that survival was as much about feeding the mind as the body. During a special assembly organized by the school, these veterans shared stories that captivated the student body. They described training exercises in dense jungles where Jessica's grandfather would intentionally separate from the group, leaving subtle signs for them to track him. These weren't just military drills, they were lessons in observation, patience, and understanding the language of the wilderness. Amanda Blake, who had recently begun spending time with Jessica, sat transfixed during these presentations. Her own grandfather, encouraged by the changing atmosphere at Riverside High, had finally begun opening up about his Vietnam experiences. The two girls discovered their grandfathers had indeed crossed paths during the war, though they had served in different units. One particularly moving story came from a former Air Force para-rescue jumper who credited Jessica's grandfather with developing training protocols that had saved countless lives. He always told us that the greatest victory was bringing everyone home alive, the veteran explained, his voice thick with emotion. Hollywood made him famous for his combat skills, but among us, he was legendary for his ability to prevent conflict. Through wisdom and preparation, the school's history curriculum began to evolve, incorporating first-hand accounts of military history that went beyond textbook facts. Students learned about the psychological toll of combat and the importance of supporting veterans' mental health. Lessons that Jessica's grandfather had championed long before PTSD was widely recognized. Jessica herself discovered new dimensions to her family history. In a box of old photographs her mother brought to school, students gathered around to see images of her grandfather training with elite units from around the world. There he was in Thailand, teaching survival techniques to local forces. Another photo showed him in Germany, exchanging knowledge with NATO allies. But it was a simple snapshot that captured everyone's attention. Her grandfather teaching a young Sylvester Stallone how to properly handle military equipment. The actor's face showed intense concentration as he learned from the man who would inspire his most iconic role. Jessica remembered her grandfather's humble comments about those days. Sly was a good student because he understood that every detail mattered. He wasn't just playing a role, he was honoring the stories of real veterans. The story took an unexpected turn when Amanda discovered an old journal belonging to her grandfather. Within its pages, he had written about a harrowing mission where Jessica's grandfather had led a rescue operation to save stranded soldiers, including Amanda's grandfather. The two men had never spoken about it afterward, carrying the weight of those memories in silence. During lunch periods, Jessica and Amanda began sharing these discoveries with their classmates. The cafeteria became a place where students brought in their own family military histories, creating an impromptu exhibition of photographs, letters, and medals. The school's art students created a mural combining these personal histories into a powerful statement about service and sacrifice. One day, a package arrived at the school addressed to Jessica. Inside was her grandfather's original Special Forces Barrette, accompanied by a letter from Stallone, explaining how her grandfather had given it to him during the filming of the first Rambo movie. "He told me to keep it until I met someone who truly understood its meaning," Stallone had written. "After seeing you stand tall in the face of doubt, just like he taught me, I know it belongs with you." The beret became a symbol of something larger than Hollywood fame or military acclaim. It represented the quiet dignity that Jessica had inherited from her grandfather, the strength to remain true to oneself despite skepticism or ridicule. Local veterans organizations began working with the school to create mentorship programs, pairing students with veterans who could share their experiences and wisdom. Jessica's grandfather's training philosophy became the foundation for these initiatives, emphasizing personal growth, ethical leadership, and community service. The story reached beyond Riverside's borders, inspiring other schools to explore the hidden histories within their own communities. Jessica received letters from students across the country who had found the courage to embrace their own family legacies, no matter how unexpected or extraordinary they might seem. As the seasons changed, the lesson that had begun with a simple class presentation continued to transform lives. The students of Riverside High learned that heroism wasn't about dramatic moments or famous names. It was about the quiet strength to stand firm in one's truth and the wisdom to use one's experiences to help others. Have you ever discovered that someone in your family had a hidden connection to history? Share your story of family revelations in the comments below. Sometimes the most remarkable stories are waiting to be told, passed down through generations like precious heirlooms. The story that began in a small-town high school classroom had grown far beyond anyone's expectations. As winter approached Riverside, news outlets from across the country began reaching out to Jessica Martinez, fascinated by how a teenager's unwavering faith in her grandfather's legacy had sparked a nationwide conversation about veterans, family heritage, and the power of truth. One crisp morning, Jessica received an unexpected call from a documentary filmmaker who had worked with Sylvester Stallone on behind-the-scenes features for the Rambo films. The filmmaker shared previously unreleased footage of Jessica's grandfather working as a consultant on the original movie. In the grainy videos, he could be seen patiently demonstrating survival techniques, his movements precise and purposeful as he taught actors and stunt performers the authentic ways of military combat. The footage revealed intimate moments that brought tears to Jessica's eyes. Her grandfather sharing quiet conversations with Stallone between takes, discussing not just the technical aspects of military operations, but the psychological impact of combat and the importance of portraying veterans with respect and understanding. These conversations had shaped the character of John Rambo in ways that went far beyond action sequences. At school, the impact of Jessica's story continued to evolve in surprising ways. The drama department decided to create an original play based on veterans' experiences, weaving together stories collected from local service members. Amanda Blake, who had discovered a passion for writing through sharing her own grandfather's story, took the lead in crafting the script. The project brought together students who had never interacted before. Athletes worked alongside theater, kids to recreate military training sequences, while art students designed sets based on photographs from various conflicts. The school's music department composed an original score that incorporated elements from military cadences and memorial songs. During rehearsals, something remarkable happened. Veterans from different eras, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Desert Storm, and more recent conflicts, began showing up to watch and offer guidance. They shared their experiences with the young actors, helping them understand the weight of the moments they were portraying. The school auditorium became a bridge between generations, where long-held silences were finally broken. One elderly veteran, watching a scene depicting a soldier's return home, stood up and spoke for the first time about his own homecoming decades ago. The entire room fell silent as he described how Jessica's grandfather had helped him cope with the challenges of civilian life, organizing support groups long before PTSD was officially recognized. The story reached Hollywood, where Stallone himself was developing a documentary about the real-life heroes who had inspired his iconic character. He invited Jessica and her classmates to participate, wanting to show how the legacy of these veterans continued to influence new generations. The actor shared never-before-heard stories about his time with Jessica's grandfather, revealing how their friendship had extended far beyond the movie set. In one touching moment captured for the documentary, Stallone described a conversation he'd had with Jessica's grandfather years ago. "He told me something I never forgot," the actor recalled. He said, "The greatest battles aren't fought with weapons, but with the courage to remain true to yourself when the world doubts you." Watching Jessica stand up for her truth in that classroom, I saw his strength living on. Amanda's transformation continued to inspire others. She used her family's resources to establish a scholarship fund for children of veterans, naming it after both her grandfather and Jessica's. The first fundraising event brought together Riverside's traditionally separate social circles, as country club members mingled with veterans' families, sharing stories and finding common ground. The local VFW hall, once struggling to attract younger members, became a bustling community center. Students began spending time there after school, recording veterans' oral histories and learning practical skills. Jessica's grandfather's training philosophy became the foundation for a youth leadership program that combined physical challenges with lessons in ethics and community service. One day, a package arrived from a military base in a remote part of the world. Inside was a letter from a special forces team that had discovered they were using training protocols developed by Jessica's grandfather years ago. They had sent her their unit patch, making her an honorary member of their team and thanking her for helping to preserve her grandfather's legacy. The school's history department developed a new curriculum that went beyond dates and battles to explore the human side of military service. Students learned about the contributions of combat medics, peacekeepers, and support personnel who worked behind the scenes. Jessica's grandfather's emphasis on preventing conflict whenever possible became a central theme. During a special evening event at the school, families gathered to share meals and stories. Amanda's grandfather, who had barely spoken about his service for decades, stood up and addressed the crowd. He described how Jessica's grandfather had saved not just his life, but his spirit, teaching him that surviving war meant learning to live with peace in his heart. The evening culminated with a surprise video call from active duty service members stationed around the world. They shared how the story of Jessica's stand in the classroom had reached them through social media, reminding them of the importance of their own family connections and the legacy they were creating for future generations. As spring approached, the changes in Riverside High School were undeniable. The rigid social hierarchies that had once defined student life had given way to something more meaningful. Young people who had once judged each other based on clothes or social status now looked deeper, understanding that every family had its own story of courage and resilience. Jessica continued to wear her grandfather's jacket, but now she wasn't alone. Other students began wearing items that connected them to their own family histories. Grandfather's dog tags, grandmother's service pins, old unit patches passed down through generations. Each item carried a story, and each story added to the rich tapestry of their shared heritage. Have you ever witnessed a small act of courage create changes beyond anything you could have imagined? Share your experiences in the comments below. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply stand firm in our truth, even when others doubt us. The arrival of spring brought new developments to the story that had begun in Jessica Martinez's English class. What started as a simple presentation had blossomed into a movement that was changing lives across the country. The quiet strength that Jessica had inherited from her grandfather was inspiring others to discover their own hidden courage. The documentary project with Sylvester Stallone had taken an unexpected turn. Rather than focusing solely on the military aspects of Rambo's inspiration, it evolved into a series exploring how ordinary people carried extraordinary legacies. Film crews visited schools nationwide where students had been inspired by Jessica's story to dig deeper into their own family histories. One morning, Jessica arrived at school to find camera crews setting up in the gymnasium. Stallone had arranged something special, a live video conference connecting Riverside High with schools across the country. Students from different backgrounds shared how the story had prompted them to explore their own family histories. A girl in Boston discovered her grandmother had been one of the first female codebreakers in World War II. A boy in Texas learned his great-uncle had been a Navajo code talker. Amanda Blake, continuing her journey of personal growth, organized a national student leadership conference focused on bridging generational gaps and preserving family legacies. The event brought together teenagers and veterans from all 50 states, creating connections that transcended age, background, and experience. During one powerful session, a retired Marine Corps general spoke about how he had trained under Jessica's grandfather decades ago. He taught us that true leadership isn't about having authority, the general explained. It's about having the wisdom to listen and the courage to stand up for what's right, even when you stand alone, just as his granddaughter did in that classroom. The impact reached beyond American borders. Military units from allied nations began sharing stories of how Jessica's grandfather had influenced their training programs. A British Special Air Service veteran sent a handwritten letter describing how the training methods he'd learned from Jessica's grandfather had saved his entire team during a critical mission. The school's initiative to record veterans' oral histories expanded into a nationwide digital archive. Jessica and Amanda worked together to create a user-friendly platform where families could upload their own stories, photos, and documents. The project became a living testament to the interconnected nature of military service and family legacy. One extraordinary revelation came when a historian discovered footage of Jessica's grandfather working with humanitarian organizations in post-war zones. The videos showed him using his military expertise not for combat, but to help communities rebuild, teaching survival skills to civilians and organizing relief efforts. This aspect of his legacy particularly resonated with students who were interested in public service beyond military careers. The drama department's play about veterans' experiences premiered to a packed auditorium. Stallone attended the opening night, sitting quietly in the back, watching as young actors brought to life the stories of service members from different eras. During the standing ovation, he embraced Jessica, telling her that her grandfather would have been proud of how she had transformed a moment of doubt into a movement of understanding. Amanda's scholarship foundation exceeded all expectations, raising enough funds to support not just college education for veterans' children, but also programs for military families dealing with PTSD and other challenges. The initiative brought together unlikely allies. Corporate executives worked alongside veteran support groups, learning from each other and breaking down long-standing social barriers. The local VFW Hall, now a thriving community center, launched a summer program combining Jessica's grandfather's training philosophy with modern leadership development. Teenagers learned survival skills alongside veterans, while also studying conflict resolution and community organizing. The program emphasized his belief that the greatest victory was preventing conflict through understanding and preparation. One day, a package arrived from the National Archives. Researchers had uncovered classified documents detailing secret missions, where Jessica's grandfather had served as a peace negotiator, using his combat experience to prevent conflicts rather than escalate them. These revelations added new depth to his legacy, showing how military expertise could be used to save lives through diplomacy. The school's curriculum continued to evolve. The English department created a course on military literature and veteran authors. The science department developed projects exploring military medical innovations that had transformed civilian healthcare. The art department curated an exhibition of combat art and therapeutic artwork created by veterans. Jessica's impact on her peers became evident in subtle but meaningful ways. Students who had once competed for social status now collaborated on community service projects. The cafeteria, once strictly divided by cliques, became a place where students rotated tables daily, ensuring no one ate alone and every story had a chance to be heard. The documentary film crews captured a particularly moving moment when Amanda's grandfather finally visited the school. Standing before the assembly, his voice shaking with emotion, he shared how Jessica's grandfather had taught him that the hardest battle was learning to live with peace in his heart after experiencing war. The two grandfathers had maintained a silent bond, each carrying pieces of a shared story that their granddaughters had finally brought to light. As the school year progressed, Jessica noticed that her grandfather's worn army jacket had started a trend, not of fashion, but of meaning. Students began wearing items that connected them to their family histories: an aunt's Peace Corps pin, an uncle's firefighter badge, a grandmother's naturalization papers. Each item sparked conversations, breaking down walls between different social groups and cultural backgrounds. The ripple effects continued to spread. Other schools began adopting Riverside High's programs. Veterans organizations reported increased engagement from young people. Military recruitment offices noted a shift in applicants' motivations. More young people were interested in serving, not for glory, but for the opportunity to contribute to peace and understanding. Have you ever seen how one person's courage can transform an entire community? Share your stories of unexpected leadership in the comments below. Sometimes the quietest voices carry the most powerful messages. As the school year drew to a close at Riverside High, the impact of Jessica Martinez's story had created changes that no one could have predicted that autumn day in English class. The final chapter of this remarkable journey would bring everything full circle in ways that touched hearts across generations. Sylvester Stallone's documentary premiered at a special screening hosted at Riverside High's auditorium. The event brought together an extraordinary gathering: veterans from multiple generations, students from across the country, and families whose lives had been touched by the story. But the most powerful moment came when Jessica took the stage, wearing her grandfather's jacket, now accompanied by dozens of other students wearing their own family legacy items. The documentary revealed something unexpected. Jessica's grandfather had been recording his own oral history for years, creating a video diary that no one knew existed. Stallone had discovered these tapes during his research, and now, for the first time, Jessica's grandfather's voice filled the auditorium. "I never wanted to be known for the battles I fought," his voice resonated through the speakers. "I wanted to be remembered for the peace I helped create, the lives I helped save, and the wisdom I passed on to others." Success isn't measured by how many conflicts you win, but by how many you prevent. The screening paused as Jessica watched, tears in her eyes, as her grandfather spoke directly about her. He had recorded this message years ago, somehow knowing that one day his granddaughter would need to hear these words. To my dear Jessica, who wears my jacket with such pride, remember that the greatest strength lies not in proving others wrong, but in standing firm in what you know is right. You carry my legacy not in the jacket you wear, but in the courage of your heart. Amanda Blake, sitting beside Jessica, squeezed her friend's hand. Their journey from adversaries to allies had become a symbol of transformation for the entire school. Amanda's grandfather, once reluctant to speak about his service, had become a regular visitor at the VFW Hall, helping other veterans share their stories and find peace with their experiences. The documentary showcased how the ripple effects of Jessica's story had spread across the nation. Schools everywhere had adopted programs inspired by Riverside High's initiatives. The digital archive of veterans' stories had grown to include thousands of entries from around the world. Military training programs had begun incorporating Jessica's grandfather's philosophy of preventing conflict through understanding and preparation. But perhaps the most profound impact was revealed in a surprise announcement. The United States Military Academy at West Point had created a new leadership course based on the principles Jessica's grandfather had championed. The course would focus on ethical leadership, conflict prevention, and the importance of understanding human stories behind military decisions. Stallone shared a personal revelation during the screening's conclusion. When I first played John Rambo, I thought I was telling a story about one man's struggle, he explained. But through Jessica's grandfather, I learned that true heroism isn't about standing alone. It's about building bridges between people, about turning personal strength into community power. The documentary's final segment showed a series of interviews with students across the country who had been inspired by Jessica's story. A girl in Miami had reconciled with her estranged veteran father after learning about her family's military history. A boy in Seattle had started a program helping refugee families share their stories of courage and resilience. A group of students in Chicago had transformed their school's social hierarchy by creating spaces where every student's family history was celebrated. As the credits rolled, Jessica stood up to address the audience. She wasn't just speaking to those in the auditorium, but to viewers around the world who would soon watch this documentary. My grandfather always said that every person carries a story worth hearing, she began. When I wore his jacket to school that day, I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was just being true to my family's legacy. What happened next showed me that when we have the courage to stand in our truth, we give others permission to do the same. Amanda joined her at the podium, their former rivalry now a testament to the power of understanding. We learned that the strongest bonds are often formed when we look past our assumptions, she added. Every family has a story of courage. Every person carries a legacy worth respecting. The event concluded with an unexpected ceremony. Veterans from different eras, inspired by Jessica's grandfather's training philosophy, had created a new tradition. They presented Jessica with a specially designed patch that combined elements from various military units, symbolizing how one person's legacy could unite people across different backgrounds and experiences. But the most touching moment came when an elderly veteran approached Jessica after the ceremony. He had traveled from across the country to share how her grandfather had saved his life twice, once in combat and again years later when he was struggling with PTSD. Your grandfather taught us that the hardest battle is the one we fight within ourselves, he said. By standing up for your truth that day in class, you won that battle not just for yourself, but for all of us who needed to be reminded of our own strength. The story had come full circle. What began as a moment of doubt in a high school classroom had transformed into a movement that reminded people everywhere about the power of standing firm in their truth, the importance of respecting others' stories, and the endless ripple effects of quiet courage. As summer approached and students prepared for graduation, Jessica's worn army jacket had become more than just a piece of clothing. It was a symbol of how one person's legacy could inspire generations to find their own strength, tell their own stories, and create their own ripples of positive change in the world. Have you ever witnessed a moment of truth that changed not just one life, but an entire community? Share your story in the comments below. Remember, every act of courage, no matter how small it might seem, has the power to transform lives in ways we never expect.